My name is Jenna Howard, and I am a 2023 resident artist at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. I'm an avid collector of Audubon books and plate books, and I am a tattooer. I think a big aha moment for me was meeting with the specialists at the beginning of our time here and learning that I have the ability to take my watercolor off of paper onto alternative surfaces. And so this has been a very eye-opening experience for me in terms of learning different modalities of the ways I can use my watercolor. I've been working on paper pretty much my entire life, and then I came here, and it was actually the day before I decided to buy all of the canvas and linen because I was like, you know what, fuck it, maybe I'll like that. And it was a good decision because I've decided now to put grounds on literally every surface that I brought with me. These were the tests that we did in the workshops, and then I kind of like immediately came back to the barn afterwards and did these tests. I was super convinced I wasn't going to work on watercolor when I was here, and then that changed after the first day. So these are all watercolor on canvas with just the different grounds. I love making tests of stuff when I have the opportunity to. This is something I did in college a lot as well. So this just kind of came very naturally. And I like repetitive stuff, if it isn't obvious enough. Just kind of conveyor belt making stuff and then just testing it in different ways and taking notes. And all the tests are meant to kind of mimic the ways that I apply watercolor in real life. So I like to do a lot of like water fades, but then I also like to layer up the watercolor a lot with a lot of opaque black and opaque white at the end. I paint a lot of very highly representational animals and flowers. This is kind of an idea I've had to paint nests made out of anti-bird material. So this is a strip of anti-bird spikes that you would see on like the top of a building or on a cornice or something, just blown up to an extreme scale. How can I relate human experiences to the way that we interact with nature? So these are the flowers from a golden employee named Justin. So these are all just ginseng roots and flowers. I'm probably going to transfer them to some type of notebook when I get home and just keep them for myself. I do a lot of research with like scientific illustrations of flowers, so having something like this is really lovely to have for reference. I think a memorable response to my work is always just when people become emotional about it. I like that a lot because it's obviously very emotional for me. So for somebody to be able to take that away from my work, more so than the hyperrealism and the way it's painted, if somebody can walk away from it with an emotional response, that's what I want to do.
My name is Deborah Weissberg, and I am a 2023 artist resident at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. I start by cannibalizing prior work, which is why I brought stuff up with me here. I keep failures because they can be reinvented again. I start deconstructing prior pieces that I feel have some spark still left in them. And I use materials that allow me to be improvisational. So the materials I've used are the handmade paper. I've used pulp. It's kind of an abaca. I take the hot glue and I draw with it on parchment paper. So I make lots of matrices or lines. Sometimes the glue will imitate a gesture in a freer way than if I was using a pencil. That gives it more arabesques or more curves. And then when I put it on my sculpture and I use the heat gun with it, it does something else. It will take another turn. It's almost like a like a stand-up comic where you keep trying out new material. So of course I got to this height and it's like, oh man, I can't go any higher. And that's when a technical person came in and said, oh, you can use this fabric. This fabric that can harden is going to allow me to have an infrastructure that is going to allow these pieces just to, come out into space and use the wall, the architecture of the wall, the architecture of the floor, to like the floor becomes the drawing surface almost of the wall. I want them to look magical. I don't want you to see how they were put together. I like being a three-dimensional person in this sea of painters and to show that these materials can be put pushed and manipulated in so many different ways, you know, and I haven't been a painter since college, and I've been using Golden for decades, and it's informed my surfaces, it's informed my sculptures. My process has not fundamentally changed, but it's expedited it, you know, and there's a freedom, and I'm not second guessing myself the way I do in my studio at home. It's more forgiving here, and I think it's the gift that the foundation has given the artist to just explore, feel completely expansive.
I have a daily walking practice, and that's important to my art practice, especially since the pandemic, since my world contracted to the few blocks around my home and studio. I think my work is inspired by my sense of anxiety. I make a lot of work about what I see in the daily news, but I'm also inspired by nature, so I sort of combine those things. My name is Lyn McDaniel, and I am a 2023 artist resident at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. I was interested in finding a way to make canvas super smooth, and I've done that here. Life-changing for my work. About 6 years ago, I moved, and I was without a studio for about a year, and all I could do was charcoal drawings at my kitchen table. And when I got back into a studio, and I realized that just the black and white really was all I needed to say what I wanted to say. And I was really inspired by Chinese hand scrolls, you know, the big, long panoramas. I started doing panoramas on paper with that palette with just a touch of red, but they do these wonderful idealized landscapes, and I was doing disasters and catastrophes, and the little touch of red was the signal for alarm. So this is my table of tests and experiments. Watercolor. I never do watercolor at home, so it was really fun to be able to just see how that works. So I was testing different ways of making, because my work is mostly monochromatic, exploring, do I want to change the blacks I use? Do I want to add different things to them? So I did these tests. I wanted to make some little postcard-sized primed papers so I could do a daily painting just to see as part of my experiments. When I wake up in the morning here and I open my curtains, often the first thing I see is a lot of fog, which really pleases me because I don't get that where I live. So I had fog on the brain, and I did for both of these pieces a layer of a glaze over with the fog. The landscape here has been so incredible. It's just beautiful here. The light and the lush green, which is why I put it in some of my paintings, is so bright here. I'm looking out the window now, just looking at this green and yellow, and just, wow. It's bringing color back into my work. After I leave here, I start another residency, and I will be using everything I learned here, there, and probably continue to play with new materials and definitely new ways of doing things.